Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I apologise, I've got a few bursts of light on my face at the moment. We've got a really warm summer's day tonight, and the window coverings are choosing to send a bit of concentrated light on my face, so my apologies about that. Anyway, we've got a really interesting topic today. The topic really is about really to do with insider tips, buying and selling to success. And we plan as part of today's session to actually discuss these main areas here. So we're going to be discussing the secrets to successful buying and selling, how to find great estate agent, tips for effective communication, strategies for closing deals quickly, and building long-term property wealth. So without further ado, I think what we'll do is we'll get started. So that's the main headline for the show tonight. If you do enjoy today's session, I would be grateful if you could like the program, and also subscribe if you feel you wish to be notified of future sessions. But without further ado, let's move on to the secrets to successful buying and selling. And just bear me a second. There we go. So right, so do feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll either try and answer them in real time, or I'll answer them afterwards. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging to keep an eye on the feeds at the same time. It should be going out over YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter or X all at the same time, and Instagram a bit later on if I can do it. Right, so the secrets of successful buying and selling. So the first thing that's really important to factor in is make sure you do a lot of research on the chosen areas that you're interested in. It's also important to understand what's going on in the real property market. So, for example, property values might be increasing, say, where you live, and they might be actually staying static or reducing in other parts of the country. And it's quite surprising how much it varies from one region to another. It's also important to set very realistic goals. Otherwise, you're going to be bitterly disappointed all the time. And then FOMO can kick in, or the fear of missing out can kick in, and you end up by making bad or wrong decisions. And timing can be really important as well, as to, when to buy, when to sell. So try and interpret what's really going on. A good field for that is to keep an eye on the press, but also speak to lots of local estate agents as far as that's concerned. Now, speaking to one by itself is probably not good enough, but if you speak to 4 or 5, they'll give you a bit of a general feel of what's going on locally in that market, okay? And then the other part really around that is if you're selling a property, make sure that you actually stage the property in the best possible form, and make sure all the fairly low-cost repairs are done to bring it up to a standard that people will be happy to buy. Quite often, very simple improvements can actually increase the perceived value of the property quite a bit. Whereas if a house is very run down, well, people might be paying a reduced price for that. But if a house is perhaps very cluttered or perhaps not very clean, you tend to find that buyers don't respond so well in that situation. And if you're not 100% clear on your strategies for negotiation, just work on that a little bit. In fact, we can assist you with that if necessary. But for example, it's very important to bear in mind that when you're dealing with an estate agent, they're typically acting for the seller, okay? And therefore, it's in their interests and it's their responsibility to get the best price they can do for their clients. So they might present they're doing you a bit of a favor or give you a so-called inside tip, as it were, but invariably it's not quite as good as it sounds, okay? So just bear that in mind. Then in terms of finding a great estate agent, a few obvious things there. Obviously, check for online reviews and seek recommendations for trusted sources. And indeed, a good place for that is perhaps to go to some of the closed Facebook groups, listen to the chatter that's generally going on there, and see how individual firms fare. Obviously, if an agent's got a lot of poor business reviews, then clearly perhaps stay away from them. And if necessary, speak to multiple agents. So this obviously with selling, your choice of agent is particularly important, because they're going to be representing you and your property. And it's also worth bearing in mind the world has all changed. When I was an agency some time ago, which was a while ago, then everything was starting to go very corporate, and the big chains were coming in. And to my way of thinking, at that stage, at that point when things happened, the whole industry lost its soul. For me, it was all about the personal relationship that you had actually with the seller of the property, and how well you looked after the potential buyers. Now, I'm pleased to say that actually the market's done a bit of a full circle. So there's a trend much more going back to very small independent agents who concentrate on very high quality service. And there are very good ways they can do that. And the reason for that is if you factor in things like Rightmove, Zoopla on the market, that is available to all estate agents. Okay, so and therefore it's really flattered the market. So agents have to stand out by being a lot better in the way they present things. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the corporates I wouldn't say they're dinosaurs by any means, but they're very good sausage machines, if I can put it that way. And it may be that your property, needs a little bit of careful nurturing in the way it's actually presented. Or it might be a little bit of a standout property or character property and requires a bit of special treatment. Okay, and look for how they interact on Facebook. Look how they interact on Instagram. Instagram has become particularly important now in the world of getting your message out there in terms of your property. And a lot of agents now, the good small agents, will tend to do a lot of video walkthroughs, possibly even use a drone, may get a professional videographer in to present your property in the best possible light. Choose an agent who you get on well with. So you're going to have a relationship with them probably for at least 3-6 months. If you don't get the right vibes from that person you're speaking, don't deal with them. It's the bottom line. You've got to also feel that agent is going to be truthful and trustful to you, especially if you're selling. And as a buyer, of course, remember what I've just mentioned, that the agent is acting for the seller. Okay. And in terms of fees, fee structures, make sure you've got a good understanding of fee structures. A long time ago, it used to be really seen as being bad if agents offered you an agreement with sole selling rights. Unfortunately, these days, a lot of agents have started introducing those terms. And it's all very well. It might suit the agent to do that, but I don't feel it's necessarily a very good way to treat potential sellers of properties. So watch sole selling rights, because you could end up, if you're not careful, paying 2 sets of fees. Okay. Now, the other thing you could look for is look at the minimum term. A lot of agents will try and lock you in for a minimum of 8 weeks, perhaps 12 weeks. I know of one case where an agent tries to sign people up for 16 weeks. A lot of the better, smaller agents will actually work on effectively of almost like a no notice or a 14-day notice period. Okay. Now, obviously, that's fair enough. You've got to play straight with the agent as well, because if at the end of the day, there are quite big costs in listing a property. So don't be unfair to the agent. But what I would say is, if the agent is giving you poor service, you should be able to cancel without feeling you're locked into an extended contract, which doesn't work to your advantage. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Then in terms of tips for effective communication, which I've forgotten to change the slide here. There we go, or the heading. Just make sure that you make it very clear to the agent when you're selling what your expectations are. And also, if you get an offer on your property, the agent may have got a bit of a hidden agenda, because he may prefer you to accept an offer from one particular buyer simply because he may be allowed to pick up an instruction on the back of it. Well, at the end of the day, you don't care really about that. You just want really good service, and you want to make sure that your interest being looked after as far as the sale is concerned. And it's really important as well that the agent is very good at listening. They should ask the right questions. they shouldn't just be interested in you, but they need to communicate well with potential buyers as well. People very much read body language and integrity and honesty as part of any discussion. If you don't feel good about the relationship, the bottom line is just don't do it. The agent as well should give you regular updates, okay? And that's very important these days because a lot of big corporate chains, again, have centralized a lot of their follow-up and the service levels have gone down as far as that is concerned. So you need to just watch out a little bit on that. The agent should be keeping in touch with both parts of the chain. In other words, what you're buying and also what you're selling at least once a week, okay? And they should be feeding back to you once a week, okay? Obviously, because that way an agent should be able to detect if there are danger signs or warning signs of something not that's not likely to go successfully to exchange of contracts. Okay, and always maintain a professional tone in the way you speak to people. People like to be treated with respect, and the agent should be doing that with you as well. Also, if certain things don't particularly work that well, just make sure you have a very clear idea in mind of what is the resolution you want out of something. Okay. Now, in real terms, an agent typically will look to always find a way forward with things, but you don't really want to end up in a situation where there are any misunderstandings or disputes. Right, and so the next point really we're going to discuss really is strategies for closing deals quickly. So, well, on that part of it, the best thing to do is, for example, if you're looking to buy, make sure that you have got your mortgage already approved in principle, okay? Because that can significantly avoid delays and also unnecessary costs. Again, going back sort of 10 years or so ago, you used to be able to go to a lender and they would actually do all the credit checks, the affordability criteria, the anti-money laundering, etc., all in advance. And therefore, when you were given a mortgage offer, the mortgage offer really meant something. In other words, it was only really subject to survey. Nowadays, when you get a decision in principle, it just means that you may have met that lender's very basic criteria. They may not have done any searching. They may not have done any affordability checks. They may not have done any anti-money laundering checks. And by law, that's all necessary, both for the estate agent to do that, but also who you're going to for finance. So be very careful to read potential signs or danger signs in the communication you have with people. So mortgage brokers, we'll just touch on that. I've covered that on previous week. But you've got mortgage brokers which are tied to one lender. Well, they're not really a broker in that scenario. They're more of a tied agent to one particular lender. You've then got a type of mortgage broker which might have access to 10 or 12 lenders, but in other words, not whole of market. And then you've got whole of market brokers. Now, ideally, you want to use a whole of market broker, okay, because they'll have access to all the available deals out there. And really, they shouldn't be looking to take, if they charge a fairly nominal fee just to get started, that's fair enough, because obviously they've got to go through all the checks and everything first, and there is a big time cost for them, and also there is some cost in setting things up to start with, but they shouldn't be asking for very much money up front. And typically, the mortgage broker will get paid a commission from the lender as well, but that commission may not be adequate. So they may also look to you for an additional fee. Now, that is potentially fine if the fee is paid on results. And what I mean by that is not just that they've got your mortgage offer, but the property's actually gone through to exchange of contracts and completion as well. So just watch out for things like that as well. Okay, so read carefully the signs of what that mortgage broker is actually telling you. So obviously, effective communication is really important there. Make sure the documents you provide to the mortgage broker are clear and equally the other way around. And make sure as well, if you're selling a property as well, that your property is sensibly priced. If your property hasn't sold in a fairly reasonable market in 6 to 8 weeks, it's probably overpriced, or your agents may not be doing a very good job. Okay, or it might be something about your property which is putting people off. And there could be a host of reasons for that. And look for response times as well. So basically, your agent, whether you're buying or selling, should respond quickly to your inquiries, and also in a very professional form. And don't be frightened of escalating the conversation, perhaps to a branch manager or even an area manager, if you don't feel you're being looked after properly. So an agent, if they're a good one, should be worth their weight in gold, because when you've got for example, a very fast-moving market, or equally a very slow-moving market, that's when the agent really skills come in, because invariably, and we talked about this last week, you can get so-called gazumping, where someone in the chain gets greedy and decides to put their price up, even though they're still buying the property at the original price. And that can cause all sorts of problems with the chain going downwards. And you can get something called gazundering typically in a downward moving market. And what will happen then is someone decides that they are paying too much for the property, and of course that has the opposite effect. And it's not necessarily the agent's fault. It could be a case that someone's trying to pull a bit of a fast one, and it's a case of, in that scenario, you've got to make a bit of a judgment call, because invariably people already spend probably several £1,000s at that stage in the whole conveyancing process, plus all time and stress. So it's important to make sure that you're very much in tune with what's sort of going on. And I suppose the final topic that I wanted to really discuss today was building long-term property wealth. Okay. Now we'll talk, obviously, if you've got more than one property, so this may be more relevant to people who've got a bit of a portfolio of properties. You could consider a mix of residential and commercial properties. So, for example, in the commercial space at this present time, because of the number of bank closures that are happening at this point, some people are actually buying up or taking leases over on banks, because invariably there's accommodation which could be converted above. So you can end up with a mixture of commercial and residential accommodation, or even you might be able to convert that what was in a bank branch into, say, residential. Now, obviously, that's much more complex, and it's going to require probably quite a bit of not only a redesign, rework, probably involving architects, but you've got to see whether the local authority is going to be sympathetic to that. But you can make quite a bit of money through those type of things. But by having a little bit of a wider portfolio, that can stand you in really good stead. And as part of that, you also need to factor in what changes are happening, mainly to do with, for example, we've got a new government now, as of the 31st of July 2024. There's obviously rumoured to be all sorts of changes happening, especially in the buy-to-let sector and for landlords. Also, you can use quite smart finance if it's a property which you're planning to let out. For example, if it requires some refurbishment or you're going to turn it into an HMO, once you've actually done that, you quite often can refinance the property because you've actually increased its value. So that means you can perhaps release a significant amount of the initial equity that you had in there to do the deal, to enable you to put down on another property. And also, it's important with properties generally, and this applies with your doing this yourself personally. You're buying or selling. Try and make sure your property is maintained to a good standard. Doesn't mean to say you have to go stupid over sort of refurbishments, but people don't like properties. To an extent, they accept properties when they get tired, but it will impact the value you can achieve for the property. But as I say, going back to the earlier point, people hate homes which are generally dirty, perhaps smell a little bit, might be there's pets there, for example, and the house hasn't been well maintained. People don't like that, and funnily enough, it can actually have a surprisingly detrimental effect on the saleability of the property, but also the money that's actually achieved for it. So Of course, if you can see through all of that, perhaps it shouldn't put you off. It just means that you would expect to get a much better deal. Then, of course, it's about whether long-term rentals are a good strategy. Is the market right for that? And you don't necessarily have to buy a property to actually gain from it. You could do a so-called lease option, and that basically means that you agree a long-term let. It might be a 7 or 10-year let on the property with a predetermined price at which you can buy the property in 7 or 10 years' time. Okay, and you might think a lot of landlords wouldn't like that. Well, actually, it can work quite well for everyone as far as that's concerned. But it's very much you have to be aware, and you have to know what you're doing there. Okay, and then the other part is make sure you continually analyze the market, look at trends, and adapt your strategies accordingly. Okay. Now, the other thing I did want to just touch on a little bit today, this session isn't specifically about it, but some of you might have heard of Robert Kiyosaki. I'm a great admirer of him. He wrote a book originally called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think it's sold about 10 million copies, probably a lot more than that, probably 15 million copies now. He's also wrote another book called The Cash Flow Quadrant, and I would highly recommend getting that book. And what it talks about, and really this type of thing I think should be taught at schools and universities as well, is that there are basically 4 quadrants. You've got the first quadrant is those people who've got a traditional job, and broadly speaking, you work to live. And then you've got people who are perhaps freelancers or consultants. So that's the second quadrant, and that's where you're typically getting paid time for money again. But the difference is when you're not working, you're not earning, and you've got no security. Okay. Now it's difficult to scale those type of businesses as well. But it is possible now with the advent of technology, like cloud-based services and a lot of services available online, which make it much easier now for micro businesses or one-person consultants, for example. And then the right-hand quadrant at the top would be for those people looking to grow and build and grow a scalable business where you might have employed 5, 10, 20, 50 people, even 100 people, and you've very heavily systemized your business, okay? And the final quadrant, which is this where it ties in particularly well with today, is, or the fourth quadrant, really is about acquiring assets which create continually recurring revenue streams. Now that works particularly well with property, and obviously buy to let is a good example of that. But it could apply to things like creating a product or service which where you're able to get a continual ongoing subscription. It may be you've structured something where you can get royalties and a whole host of other things. But the reason I want to touch on that is actually building for capital growth and also for recurring revenue streams gives you a lot of long-term security. So we've actually done quite well today. I'm just going to quick look at the comments just to see whether it's all gone, everything's coming through. I'm not seeing anything at the moment, but I do know we had a slight problem with Facebook last week. The streaming went fine, but some people having trouble posting messages. If that is you, if you could just very kindly message me afterwards, it would be useful to know. And just to do a quick recap, this is obviously what we talked about today. Let me just get rid of this little banner because it's right across the screen. Here we go. And in terms of making contact after today, those are my contact details. Now, we will be talking about this a little bit more next week, and in particular the week after. But I'm pleased to say we just launched a new service under the name of Property Advisory Service. It complements what existing agents are doing out there. But what I love doing is helping individual people and love coaching and supporting people in their growth. And obviously, as part of that, I've been able to put together a suite of products and services and also access to huge amounts of data. So, for example, if you're looking to buy a property, not only can I give you a lot of details about that property, but I can give you a lot of details about the area based on about 27 different data points. So we will be featuring that a little bit more in future weeks. But I just want to say thank you very much for joining in today. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. and we'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Thanks very much indeed. Take care. Bye.